Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Mindalia TV team, welcome to Mindalia live streaming. We are being joined today by Sunny Chase. Sunny is not only the host of the show, but she's also the host of ABC Solutionary Sundays. She is a chief strategist for Whole Lifetimes magazine, the longest running conscious magazine in America. Sunny is a producer, a moderator, and a mythbuster. But before starting with Sunny and our guest today, we want to remind you that Mindalia.com is an international nonprofit organization and that you can collaborate with us just by liking this video, leaving us a positive comment down this video, leaving us a message in the chat. You can also share the content with someone that you know that can benefit from the content that we're going to be talking here today. Also, while we are live streaming, we want to invite you to participate through the active chat. Having said that, I have the great pleasure of introducing and saying to Sunny Chase, welcome to Mindalia. Sunny, how are you?
Well, I usually say I'm doing great and isn't all well and all that kind of stuff. But I have to say that in the beginning of the new year here, I have mixed feelings. I mean, I honestly thought, Myrna, at this point in my life, my mom died of cancer when I was 10. And I honestly thought by this time, the people would have figured out cancer for sure. I also figured we wouldn't still be wearing jeans, but that's okay with me. When I watched 2001 Space Odyssey, I thought by this time we might be wearing, some sort of weird clothes. And I also thought that we wouldn't have wars anymore like the way they did in 1917 or 1820 or 1540. I mean, that idea of taking human beings to kill other human beings, it makes no sense to me. And I thought the big people, the old people, the adults would figure that out. And I thought, gosh, I mean, things like prejudice and bigotry and that kind of thing would just dissolve somehow. So I'm hopeful, and I'm seeing that, of course, this is Martin Luther King season. And I'm reminding myself that the idea of America in particular was an idea that we haven't gotten to yet. And Martin Luther King, of course, talked about that so much about what's possible for this country, what's possible for our brothers and sisters together. And we really have not arrived yet. So I'm hopeful and I'm sad at the same time. So that's how I am today.
Well, I'm gonna just get the what I find that's the most important highlight, and it will be the fact that you're hopeful, and that's where we can't decay. We need to. It's getting hard. It's getting really hard to stay optimistic. That has been my thought during the past week with so many things we see around us, not only here in America, but in other countries. How do we stay hopeful? How do we keep ourselves still wanting to do the right thing? Because I was actually thinking about you yesterday because I mentioned to someone the fact that we try to live, a green life, a peaceful life, a kind life. And this person was almost offended by it and said, like, so you think that you can change the world? Like, what you do doesn't really matter. It's not that important. And I was like, I think my head just twirled 360. Like, you know what? We actually work on a daily basis. And it's even if we change one person, even if we change one lifestyle, one habit, I'll feel super happy about it.
I was watching my fabulous Instagram account, which I actually have a really good one. And on it, Tutez Cat Martinez, who is one of the top environmental warriors in the world. He's only 19. He's been on the path since he was 6. And of course, he's good friends with Greta Thunberg, and they are all working together, these kids. It's amazing. And on his Instagram, somebody put on for Earth Guardians, there's the thought of one person, and the way he put it was that's one person, and 7.5 billion people are that one person. In other words, each one of us is what makes up this whole world. So again, when I'm always talking about the power of one, I believe in that. And then sometimes, I feel sad, but the other part of that is that I realize, I mean, even in my family and in my community, I realize that there are different ways to be handling anything that we may see. You know, there are people who dance in the streets. There are people who march in the streets. There are people who change legislation. There are people who write movies, sing songs, tell stories, have conversations like we're having today. There's so many different ways to come at a situation. And I do think that that's sort of like the organs in our body. I mean, we need all of that. We need the people changing legislation, and we need people in the streets, and we need the people writing letters, and we need the people who are really connecting with their families and doing what they can as moms and dads and aunties and, you know, like that with our children. So that's what gives me hope, that I know that there are lots of people who are doing that, and so many unsung heroes that we'll never know.
We will never know about them, but we have had many of them here. We have seen so many people making small changes, and that's what matters, right? We don't need one super perfect human being. We need many human beings that are trying to be together on a daily basis, that are trying to be better, and that are willing to change habits, to change small habits one day at a time. I think we have seen many of them, right?
Well, yeah, and we have certain people who stand up for things. And you know, today, before we bring on Lynne Lyman, who I'm so grateful and excited to be on, she's one of my heroes because she really takes a stand and has for a long time. And she does things that I could never do. So thank God, literally, for her. And I want to start before we bring her on. I really do want to honor Martin Luther King because it is Martin Luther King's season, and of course his birthday was yesterday. And then, you know, we're having the holiday. Thank God we have a holiday. That's sort of a new thing in America. James Taylor wrote, when I'm speaking of all different people doing different things, James Taylor, who I love, wrote a poem about Martin Luther King that he said set to music. And so I'm just going to sing it a cappella for us, and then I'm going to bring on Lynn. This is my song I sing every Martin Luther King season. Oh, let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King and recognize that there are ties between us, all men and women living on the earth, ties of hope and love, sister and brotherhood, that we are bound together in our desire to see the world become a place in which our children can grow free and strong. We are bound together by the task that stands before us and the road that lies ahead. We are bound and we are bound. There's a feeling like a clenching of a fist. There's a hunger in the center of the chest. There's a passage through the darkness and the mist. And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. Oh, let us turn our thoughts today to Martin Luther King. I almost never get through that. So let us turn our thoughts today. And I was watching so many things about him lately, and I was writing down all these quotes to speak about today. And I just realized there's just so many things. I could take 14 hours writing all the different things that he said. And so I'd rather you guys hear him say them. So just go on YouTube, and KCET did an incredible show on PBS last night about all different things about Martin Luther King to learn much more about him. You know, there are many things that we sort of know superficially, like all the things that are always talked about, they're just repeated and repeated and repeated. But there's so many deeper things that we don't really, you know, many of us don't know, like how he was really talking about nationalism. He was talking about the environment. He was talking about ecology. He was talking about so many other things about, let us be careful about what guns, where we point our guns, because at some point they'll be pointed back at us. So, you know, there are many reasons that we're honoring him this season, and to be inspired by him. So makes me sad that we're not there yet. When I think of his last words, and I think of, you know, when he was saying, I may not get there with you. It just makes me so sad that we're still in this place. But anyway, we're going to bring Lynn on, and she's going to bring the good news. So I want to talk a little bit, calm myself down here, and bring on Lynne Lyman. And I just want to tell you a quick few things about her, and then we're just going to get to it. But there's so many things I could say, so I'm just going to be really quick. Harvard grad, Berkeley grad, aide to members in Congress, former California director of Drug Policy Alliance, co-author of Prop 64 that decriminalized marijuana in California, 47 that was really amazing, where it brought nonviolent nonviolent offenses that were federal, that were, yeah, felonies down to misdemeanors, down to expunged. Kind of making sense of all of that, putting the crime and the punishment in some sort of sense. She's also been a civil rights activist, manager of many political campaigns, speaker at multiple events, HuffPost contributor, and many, many other things. So, hi, Lynn, just come on and speak so I can drink some tea and stop crying.
Good morning, Sunny. Good morning. So good to be with you. Let's start with Martin Luther King, and thank you for starting us there. Martin Luther King was a formerly incarcerated individual. He was system impacted, and he was a victim of state violence. Martin Luther King was arrested 30 times during his 13-year fight for justice in this country. And so the work that I do is about fighting for the currently incarcerated and the formerly incarcerated people and victims of state violence. And so Martin Luther King very much was and continues to be a guiding star, an example of how people who go to jail are not throwaways. We tend to think of them that way, but Martin Luther King did, some of his best and most creative work while incarcerated, and was able to impact other people in that space. And so I just want to start today with sort of acknowledging that in this country, we tend to throw people away. And across the country, we have 2.5 million people behind bars right now, and another 5 million on state supervision, meaning parole, probation, GPS units, and whatnot. And it just has never happened in any society in human history, that a society has incarcerated so many of its own people. There is no precedent for this in history, and there's no other country that does what the United States does. And Los Angeles, where we are here today, is the epicenter of incarceration in the world. Los Angeles County has the largest jail in the world. We have over 17,000 people in jail here every single day. And worse than that, or in addition to that, the vast majority of them are suffering from acute mental illness, drug addiction, and chronic homelessness. That is who we have in our jails in Los Angeles. And so I'm here today to talk about Reform LA Jails Measure R, a ballot initiative that is attempting to begin to fix this very broken and inhumane jail system here at the epicenter in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, yes, so this is the deal, and I want to make it really clear with people so we can understand what's happening. March 3rd in California, we have, believe it or not, the primary vote. And for so long, we've had it in June. So let's just kind of wrap our heads and get ourselves kind of moving, because it's in the beginning of the year. We've just finished with the holidays, and boom, we're into it. So, again, we're normally sort of the last caboose, and we're one of the first this year. So we need to, or this time, right, Lynn? So we got to kind of gear up here.
Not only is the primary in a completely different month this year, so as Sunny said, our election is March 3rd, but in LA County, we've changed our voting system completely. And so we have a new way of voting here. And so voters are going to have to really tune in, get educated, and learn about the new system. So in LA County, we no longer have polling places. We now have universal voting centers. There'll be over 1,000 voting centers across the county, and people can vote at any of them. You no longer have to vote at your nearest polling place. You can vote at any of these voting centers. You will also have, the great news is we will have 11 days to vote this year. Instead of just getting out on March 3rd, the voting centers open on February 22nd. So we will have 11 days to get ourselves to the polls. There will be no excuse for not voting this year with 11 days. We can also vote by mail and just drop those ballots off at the voting center. You don't need a signature, a special person to drop it off for you at a special place. They've really tried to simplify the process. There's some great things about this new system, I believe, but the fact that it's new is just challenging for people. We all have a hard time with change. And this election for LA voters especially will be very different.
So, okay, guys, so this is the situation. So it is March 3rd, and this is, as I understand it, this is our presidential primary as well. I mean, it's the whole deal. Like, yes. Because I want you to know, Lynn, when I chat with people, they're very confused. It's like, wait, what? The president? It's in 8 weeks. It's 7 weeks. It's 6.5 weeks. Whatever it is. I mean, it's like upon us right now. And as this show will be playing today and then other days and stuff, so guys, just March 3rd, so you'll tune in whatever time you actually hear this show. So will this help with voting fraud, do you think? I mean, there's so many things to talk about today, but I mean, we know that that's so rampant in America and so not fair also.
Yeah, so I think the new system they've designed is very solid. It includes paper verification. It's a closed loop system. It's not connected to the internet. There's ways to verify. Folks who want to interfere in elections will, find ways. But I think that this system is certainly stronger than the system we had before. And the fact that it's not connected to the internet, I think really gives us some safeguards from foreign hacking.
Perfect. So, guys, this is the deal. It's called Measure R. It's Reform LA Jails. So I love the name, just says what it is. Our jail system does not work at all. And, when I talk to people about jails, it's so odd because, I mean, I even saw this thing on 60 Minutes where I forgot which interviewer it was. It wasn't Anderson Cooper, but the point is they went to Germany and they were walking through the jails in Germany. And guys, when I tell this story, Lynn, to people that I'm just about to say, people just they don't even think I'm telling the truth. I say, Google it, watch it. But they have not cells, like cell. I mean, we don't even we get upset about our chickens in a cage, like we can't even eat those kind of eggs. And yet we're going to put human beings in a cell with no privacy and no silence for sleeping and no anything. So I feel you wanting to speak.
So there are other countries have found much more humane ways to deal with crime. And Germany, yes, but Norway really leads the world right now with their model of incarceration. And it is much more like a dorm where people have their own little apartment with their space, with a desk. They can move about freely. And those models have been shown to be far more successful, both in rehabilitating people, in helping them reintegrate into society. Because one of the things we don't think about is what happens after we throw somebody away and put them in jail. 98% of all people who go into jail or prison will be coming back home to the community. And that kind of experience makes it much more difficult for them to come home and to be successful. In California, there are 4,800 legal barriers to having your full rights back once you've been incarcerated and convicted of a felony. For example, in California, you cannot be a hair salon owner. You cannot be a dog walker. You cannot be a bingo caller. There's 4,800 barriers to you having your full civil rights. Once you've been convicted, once you've served your time and been released by the state, you are now dealing with these collateral consequences for the rest of your life. So not only is the way that we incarcerate and punish people so inhumane, but the way that we ruin the rest of their lives and undermine society is also problematic. But let me talk about Measure R and about the population that Measure R is really seeking to help. So in LA County jails, we have LA County Jail, in fact, is considered the largest mental institution in the United States. Let me say that again. LA County Jail is the largest mental institution in the United States of America. We have 5,500 people with acute mental illness inside the jail right now. These are people who are, I've been to the women's mental health floor multiple times to try to register them to vote and engage with them. These women are in straitjackets from their neck to their feet, a full dress. They are tethered to the benches, tethered to the poles. They are in severe distress. And this is how we treat the most vulnerable among us. This is how we're treating them. So Measure R is our attempt to fight back against this state violence and oppression. And it does two specific things. So let's get into the meat of what Measure R does. The first thing it does is it requires the county, and it gives the county 7 months to develop a plan to reduce the jail population with a focus on getting people with mental illness out of the jails and into community-based healthcare programs. So again, it gives the county 7 months to come up with a plan to reduce the jail population with a focus on people suffering from mental illness. The second thing it does is it gives the current oversight body, there is a civilian oversight commission over the sheriff's department that the people who, those of us who've been pushing for this reform also pushed to get the civilian oversight commission many years ago. But when the county created that, they did not give them the teeth and the power and the authority to oversee the sheriff. Folks need to understand that the LA County Sheriff believes that he doesn't answer to anybody. He believes that he only has to answer, every 4 years at an election, and that no one has the right to investigate what's going on in those jails. And so Measure R gives something called subpoena power, which is the power to compel documents, witnesses to conduct investigations. So it gives subpoena power to this oversight commission so that they can begin to actually do the oversight. We know that we've had thousands of sheriff shootings over the last decade, and no one's been prosecuted. We've had dozens of suicides in the jail. We have a deputy violence, deputy on inmate violence inside the jail, and all of these things go unchecked. We can't even get all the information. And so Measure R is going to give this commission the tool to investigate this misconduct. So again, two things: a jail plan and investigating misconduct.
Amazing. Now, I also want to let you guys out there know that I just want to talk about Patrice Colliers a little bit. And Lynn, I want to remind us that I want to chat a little bit more about, sort of Norway and Germany and that sort of thing, because I think that what has happened in this country, and I don't understand it, but when I do chat with people, when I talk about how these other systems are where people have their own privacy. They have a little apartment with solid walls that you don't see through, private bathrooms, a desk to write on, a bed to sleep in where they can be quiet and get actual sleep, turn the lights off and have actual darkness. Really, really horrible torture is when you leave lights on, when you don't let people sleep for days on end, let alone years on end. They don't have things like solitary confinement. That's a whole other conversation, but we've got to stop solitary confinement. Just please, let's stop that. So the idea that we want to really, really punish people so deeply for something. What is that? Why do we demonize these people? Why do we, I've talked to people who come out of prison, and they say one of the most painful parts among all these other things we're talking about is the feeling of being thrown away, the feeling of being discarded and not seen by society. And so I just would love to kind of shift that idea of why we feel this way about people who go to prison. And again, it feels like Les Mis. Some of these people go to prison because they've stolen bread, honestly, for their family.
So let me say this. If people in jails and prisons were white, if the 2.5 million people were white, this would be over. The reason we do this is because they are Black and they are brown. And our incarceration system, our policing system, were set up around slave patrols. And that is where the tactics and the approach to crime in this country is really rooted. And, what we have done since the civil rights movement, post Jim Crow, is since we could no longer legally discriminate against people of color, we began to use the criminal justice system as our new Jim Crow, as Michelle Alexander's book is titled. And we essentially decided to make everything criminal. I mean, there are so many laws on our books. We criminalize all kinds of behavior, and then we selectively choose who to punish for violating that behavior. Who amongst us has not broken the law? Raise your hand. We've all broken the law. We do it again and again, sometimes because you don't know, because there are so many laws, and sometimes because you're poor, sometimes because you're sick, sometimes because you're suffering from substance use a disorder, sometimes because you're suffering from a mental health disorder. But we all break the law, but this country chooses again and again to only arrest and incarcerate Black and brown people. So when you say why, that is because our systems in this country are rooted, and particularly our criminal, and I don't like to say criminal justice system, it's a criminal legal system. Our criminal legal system is rooted in injustice and racism. And with here, we just continue to pile on the things that we want to incarcerate people for. So I think there's some stuff around, punishment and Christianity and pilgrims that kind of also got us started here theoretically. But in terms of how we've enacted this, it's really based in racism.
So also I'm thinking of our Constitution that we are talking a lot about, with the impeachment and with different things, and other countries in the world looking to America as sort of the beacon of getting it right. And of course, now we're seeing how we're getting perhaps things are crumbling and we're going to rebuild, I hope, or build in a new way, whatever's going to happen. But I think of the Constitution, and I think of things that go on in our criminal legal system. I will use that term now forever because it is not justice. Criminal and justice are oxymorons. I'm thinking of different things that are really not constitutional. Like, for example, taxation without representation. I mean, how can people be in jail and then come out and get a job and be taxed, but then they can't vote? That's not constitutional. How can people be held in prison because they can't get out on bail? That's not okay. That's not constitutional. They're not allowed to stay in jail for, I think it's 72 hours but sometimes they're in jail in our LA jails for 9 months or longer just because they can't pay the bail to get out. Yeah. That's not constitutional. What's going on here, Lynne?
Well, let's talk about the Constitution and the fundamental problem with the Constitution when it comes to the criminal legal system, which is the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is the loophole in the Constitution when it comes to full civil rights for all people in this country. The 13th Amendment explicitly states that you have all these rights unless you've been convicted of a crime. And so, that's the loophole. And so when we made everything into crimes and then selectively targeted people of color for those crimes, we've now cut that entire population out of access to their full civil rights. So the Constitution has that fundamental flaw. We have got to fix the 13th Amendment at some point. There are other pieces of the Constitution that do protect our prisoners. So the 8th Amendment has been a really important one when we have fought legal battles to protect incarcerated people. The 8th Amendment, which is a protection from inhumane treatment. And so in California, when our prisons were so overcrowded for decades, there was an organization who sued the state for violation of the 8th Amendment because of our prison overcrowding. And that case went on for 10 years. And the California state government, even here in Louisville, California, even Jerry Brown, former Governor Jerry Brown, fought that battle. After 10 years, it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And in 2011, the Supreme Court ruled that indeed, California had violated the 8th Amendment rights of prisoners and ordered California to start reducing its prison population. Now, instead of taking that opportunity to move people into alternatives to incarceration, into community-based treatment, into reentry programs, California decided just to move all those state prisoners into county jails. So there was no reform. That was Public Safety Realignment Assembly Bill 109. And that happened in 2000, and it began to happen in 2011 when hundreds of thousands of prisoners were moved into county jails, out of the state prison to, tens of thousands of prisoners were shifted. And so really what happened was conditions for people got worse, because conditions are worse in jail than they are in prison. Because prisons are considered longer term facilities, they have some programs. They may have some drug treatment programs, they may have some educational programs, some classes. Jails, which were built to be temporary holding facilities while people were processed for crimes they were charged with, have no programming. They have no spaces for programming. They don't have visitation areas. They don't have places where children can come and see their parents. And so what we've done, and just bringing us full circle back to the jails, because there is a difference between prisons and jails that are both problematic, but in LA County, it's really our jail where we have a vastly overcrowded jail system. As I said, most people there have severe mental illness, drug addiction, the homelessness, the people who we know are homeless in jail, just in the last year has increased from 25% of the jail population to 40% of the jail population. And we also know that roughly 40% of people in jail are there waiting for trial. They have not been convicted. They're there because, as you said, Sunny, they cannot afford to pay bail. There is an effort in California to reform our bail system to end cash bail. That is going to be on the ballot again in November. So we can come back and talk about that. But these are all intersecting problems that leave us with this horrific situation. I want to get back to race, and I want to get back to our campaign chair, Patrisse Cullors. Patrisse Cullors is for folks who don't know, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter and a leader in this country, in this city, in the state, in the country, and really globally now on issues of racism and state violence against incarcerated people. And so Patrisse Cullors, who's the chair of this campaign, this really stemmed out of her personal experience with the jail system. Her brother, who suffers from a psychoaffective disorder, ended up in jail for the first time as a teenager and was disappeared in the jail, was repeatedly beaten, nearly killed multiple times, and spent, over a decade in and out of the jails. And so, and to this day, continues to be arrested frequently. And so this is what happens. And this is why we do this work. Now, I also want to talk about my own brother, who spent 20 years in and out of the jail. But as white people, he never suffered the same kind of violence that Monty, who's African-American, suffered inside the jails. And to be very clear, it's not that it's easy to be in jail as a white person, but your chances of surviving, your chances of not being killed, your chances of not being beaten by the very people who are there supposedly to protect you are much greater if you are white. And so my brother, who also suffers from mental illness, addiction, chronic homelessness, has been in this system as well for 20 years. But the last time he was arrested, something different happened. Because of my work in the system, because he was arrested here locally in LA County Jail, where I know the system, I know the players, I was able to intervene on his behalf. I was able to get the county to offer him instead a mental health diversion program. And they did that. And this mental health diversion program also came with housing, what we call housing first, meaning you don't have to be sober, you don't have to be abstinent in order to be housed. See, the approach we've taken historically in this country is, yeah, we'll give you services, we'll try to get you housing, but you have to be sober first. You cannot be using any substances. If someone is suffering from an addiction, they do not have control over that. If they do not have a home, they cannot stabilize themselves enough to even think about their addiction or their mental health or their physical health for that matter. With my brother 2.5 years ago, he was given an opportunity to be in a program that came with permanent supportive housing. That is the way of the future. After he was stabilized in a transition home, he was given a little apartment in South LA, the first apartment of his own he's ever had. They get wrapped around the services, the mental health treatment, the drug addiction, the Hep C treatment, and everything else. And, you know, for the first time since he was 9 years old, he's now sober, stable. And so that's the opportunity. That's what can happen. And he's someone who, you know, costs the state a lot of money. And the cost of treating him now in his apartment, the state pays for it, the county pays for it, but it is a fraction of what they were paying to keep him in jail day in and day out. And he is living a beautiful, happy, productive life now instead of being another throwaway human being.
Whoa. First of all, amen to that story. And again, it's an illustration, though, of what we have going on here. Again, I think of our original Constitution talking about slaves or African Americans or Negroes or whatever the term we want to use in those days was 3/5 of a person. I mean, this idea that I mean, it's just so painful. I can barely talk about it. But it's important to talk about and to bring it out because we have to tell the truth about this and get underneath it and get through it and every other preposition we can think of to get to the other side of this river that's just so deep and dark and just not fair. It's just not fair. The money, you were talking about that. And Patrisse Cullors, by the way, also, guys, I mean, again, Lynn, you may not know this, but I've chatted on my show or different places in the world and, whatever about Black Lives Matter. And this idea that sort of Black Lives Matter got misappropriated. And then Patrisse ended up writing the book. I don't know if I have the title right. They Call Me a Terrorist.
When They Call You a Terrorist.
And when they call you a terrorist, right.
And that is about her and her brother.
Oh, yeah. And in it, it also talks about how she was demonized and how people were thinking Black Lives Matter was some, other than it actually was. 3 young women saying, excuse me, Black Lives Matter, after I think it was after Trayvon Martin, I believe, after that shooting, it was like, what the bleep? And then people are going to do that. So I just find it so unfair. And I just feel that in my work and as I move through, I just see so much, what term do I want to use? I use ignorance in a way of with compassion somehow, just not knowing. And so I think it's so important for us to really talk about these things and let people understand. Let's talk about the money for a second. I mean, the fact that to put someone in jail costs our taxpayers per year. I mean, I think of this. It's about 70. Go for it.
Let me tell you what it costs in LA County. Annually, the sheriff spends $1 billion incarcerating Angelenos every year. $1 billion.
With a B, people.
With a B. And per prisoner, the cost is roughly $50,000 a year. The government county office of diversion and reentry has estimated that it costs 7 times less to treat someone with mental illness in a community-based program than it does to keep them in jail. So we are also just throwing away our tax dollars on this, inhumane treatment that doesn't rehabilitate people, doesn't connect them to services, pushes them further into their own trauma and their own pain, and exacerbates all of their health conditions.
So I'm thinking, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I mean, guys, let's just crack this open and think of it in a completely different way. So in Uganda, for example, when a teenager is acting out in the community, being a jerk, whatever they are being, what the community understands is that teenager needs something, needs love, needs the community to come together for them. So what do? They do not isolate them. They do not put a dunce cap on them and put them in the corner. They do not take him away from the community. They realize all the opposite. What they do is they put them in the center of their community and they all gather around that person and they send love in ways that are spiritual, and they also speak of it. They stand around them and they speak into the circle about how much they love this person, their gifts, their contribution to the community. They just love on them, as they say. And it just breaks my heart, because I think if we had a person in our community who did something wrong, and we understood that nobody really wants to do wrong stuff. They just don't. I mean, come on, let's get real. And if we said, wow, instead of putting you in jail and spending 50 grand a year, what would it be like if we then gave you and your family 50 grand a year, or half of that, 25 grand a year, and you do what you do with that. That is our love to you, because we understand that it's not about breaking into cars or, do whatever it is that one might do. Just try that on as a concept, people. It's just, we've got it so backwards here.
Yeah.
We've just got it so backwards. So I just feel like, even on this show, I just want to crash through it and move this wheel a different direction in our consciousness.
And so let's just talk about how folks can make a difference. I think that particularly at this point in our American history, it feels overwhelming. There is so much going on, certainly in the world, but just here in this country with the president that we have, with the government that we have. There's, with the terrible things that people now feel free to say openly, the racism, the sexism. And so it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like, how can I make a difference? There's just nothing I can do. And that's why I do the work that I do, which is I help write laws, I help pass laws that bring us to a more humane society. And so this is just a real specific, tangible, sizable thing people can do, which, as we know, vote yes on Measure R. That's what it looks like.
Beautiful.
An election's coming up. In addition to choosing president and any other local races you may be voting in, if you live in Los Angeles, please make sure you scroll all the way through your ballot options, look for Measure R, and vote yes. It's that simple. And by doing that, you are saying, I have a stake in this community. I want to make my community better. I believe in treating the most vulnerable among us with full dignity and respect and love. We say care, not cages. And that really exemplifies what this is about. I think about my brother, but for those of you in the audience who also have a loved one that struggles with mental illness or struggles with addiction, how would you want that loved one to be treated if they do have a run-in with law enforcement? How do you want them to get the rehabilitation they need? Would you ever send your loved one to jail if they were using drugs? If they had a schizophrenic episode? No, we want doctors and medical professionals and social workers to help us with these problems. And so I just make this appeal that I know there's so much going on, and the campaigns on the political presidential level are going to get crazy. And I just really urge your viewers, your listeners, to remember Measure R as one tangible, positive thing. I know you were talking about positivity in the beginning, where we could find hope. This is a small sliver of hope. Voting yes on R.
Well, Lynn, first of all, I really want to honor you for everything that you do, because you do stand for it. You stand for it really strongly and very clearly. And during the New Year's time, I was talking about my kind of feeling for what I want this next decade is to have deeper roots and bigger treeness, more leaves and more branches. And I look to you, and I see you as an example of that. So much. One thing you were saying also about doctors, and I was thinking about, when you're in the hospital and you let's say somebody gives you wrong medication for, let's say you're working on your heart or whatever, and then maybe they get you up to go to the bathroom, and you just kind of have a fit, and you kind of go wild, and you break the wall, or knock things over. They don't put you in jail for that. They don't say that you were doing vandalism. They get the doctor in to work on your meds. But if you're out and about and something were to happen like that, you walked into a 7-Eleven or something and had an episode, and they called, the jail, the police. And so it's just the whole thing just kind of,
and you don't
blows my mind.
You don't even need to be having an episode out on the street. The last time my brother was arrested, he was sitting on a sidewalk eating a sandwich. That was his crime. That was his crime. Yeah, we prosecute homelessness in this country. And so, yeah, you don't have to be having an episode, making a disturbance. You just have to be, for the most part, poor and struggling. And most often
wrong time or whatever. And it's in many cases being the wrong color. And I think of these situations where when I drive down the street, and in LA, there are a lot of, cop cars just driving around. And I think, I remember in the olden days with Opie and, Andy, I'm old enough to remember, and policemen were called peace officers.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, whatever happened to that concept? And now when I see them, I'm like, oh my God, did I stop enough at that stoplight or, whatever. And I think if I was Black, that fear that you have, I hear the stories with Trevor Noah and these different people because he was driving a Tesla and he was pulled over so many times. It's just, guys, we've just got to calm down and feel into our hearts and make all this make sense and think deeper. These sort of ideas that have been perpetuated for years about, if someone's been in prison, then they're demonized and these kind of things. We've just got to soften up about all that. Come on, there are no throwaway people. Like spiritual people say there are no, none of us are a mistake. Come on, let's live that.
And, we have, most people know someone or have someone in their family who have been incarcerated. In California alone, 8 million people have convictions on their record. So it's a huge number. We're 40 million roughly in California, and 8 million of us have a criminal conviction. So most people, if you're in the coffee shop or you're on the train or you're on the sidewalk, wherever you may be, you look around you and, roughly 1 out of 4 people have suffered from incarceration, because that's what we do in this country.
So this is really the truth.
Is about, because you talked about policing, and I just think it's important to remember that we have decided as a society to put most of our resources at the federal level into the military and at local levels into policing and incarceration. So when we look at how do we spend our tax dollars, as a society, we have decided to prioritize militarized militaries, militarized policing, and really concentration camp style prisons. And it costs a lot of money to do those things. And until we as the people stand up and say, no, we want our money to go to schools, we want our money to go to healthcare, we want our money to go to fighting the climate crisis and renewable energy sources, none of this is going to change. We have to stand up. And I'll tell you what's so significant, in addition to what Measure R does, this is only the second time in Los Angeles history that citizens have taken something to the ballot, because we got tired of our government to do the right thing when it came to jails. And so we said, no, we're going to take this to the voters. It only happened one other time in 2012. And it's the first time that a criminal justice reform has been taken to the ballot in California. And I'll tell you, this is the future. I'm tired of arguing with politicians, truly. I am tired of arguing with politicians and trying to get them to do the right thing, because they are motivated by power and money, all of them. And so I believe in taking the power to the people through the ballot. And I want people to join me in the future of making change through the ballot, because we do not have time to wait for politicians.
And guys, the other thing is if you're not in LA, you may know people who are in LA. And the other thing is this is sort of very, very hopefully, and I'm sure it's true, that this will be the tuning fork. LA, this measure, this movement, this idea, this change in consciousness. So the idea of this is not just, oh, let's just change LA jails. I mean, yes, because it's the largest in the world, absolutely, and we're going to make it happen. And this, of course, we want this ripple effect to go all over the country and hopefully the world. And I want to let you guys know also, this is endorsed by Bernie Sanders, by John Legend, by James Fonda, by Ava DuVernay, by Alyssa Milano, by so many people. I mean, the list goes on, and we're adding to it all the time, to Julian Castro. So this is a big, big movement. And I know we're coming to the end of our time. I can feel it. And I love to chat with you all day about this and bring you the information. But guys, so let us, I know Myrna's going to ask you or ask me to tell you how to reach me. So I'm just going to quickly say that you can see me here next week. You can see me on ABC Solutionary Sundays. You can see me or read about me in Whole Life Times, and just my name's Sunny Chase on the formats that you guys know, and portals and all that stuff. And Lynn, how can we reach you, and how can we find out more about Measure R? Going to the website and that.
Yes, so please go to the website, voteyesonr.org, voteyesonr.org, and sign there. And if you are a Los Angeles voter, please sign a commit to vote pledge right there. If you're not a Los Angeles voter, please sign up to get on our listserv, because we are connected to all the movements for civil rights and justice for incarcerated people across the country. So anyone can join our listserv. You don't have to be a Los Angeles voter. But again, voteyesonr.org.
And when you go to the website, guys, there are also a lot of things happening between this very second and March 3rd. Excuse me. So like town halls and events and speakers at different things. And there are things going on, Martin Luther King season, the next week there'll be marches and different things that are happening. And to close us out, I want to just read a few words from Martin Luther King, where he was so believing in our Constitution and the idea of democracy. And again, knowing that at that time, when he lived in this country and he was still alive, he knew that we were an idea, an experiment, a sociological experiment that is in process. But he's also saying, this is a quote from him: "Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must conduct ourselves forever the struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force." So for all of us spiritual peeps out there, there's a lot there with Martin Luther King. So again, I want to honor him on this day. I want to honor you, Lynn, on this day for standing strong for something and for inspiring so many people to be doing whatever they can. And guys, just do whatever you can. And doing little things like voting yes on R can make the difference. It's such a ripple effect for people you will never know. It's like giving blood, which I know Lynn does every Martin Luther King season, even though she practically passes out. It's like that gift of life, that anonymous gift that we give. Voting for yes on R is like an anonymous gift. You will be saving the lives of people you'll never meet, but that's what we do. That's what we do. That's what we're about, right? So Myrna, take it away, girl. And thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you for having.
Thank you, ladies, one more time for allowing the Mindalia TV cameras for being a channel for your ideas. Before we say goodbye, we just want to remind everyone watching that Mindalia.com is an international nonprofit organization, and that you can collaborate with us just by liking this video, sharing it with someone that you know that can benefit from the content that we discussed here today. You can subscribe to our channel. We have nothing else to say by now, but thank you. And until next time, we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.